Judge, our team believes that schools should employ edutainment as their primary education method. Edutainment means education delivered primarily through entertaining formats such as games, simulations, storytelling, interactive media, roleplay, videos, and gamified learning platforms. Primary education method means the dominant classroom approach, but not the only method used. Here, schools change curriculum around interactive, game-based, and engaging learning as the default mode. Traditional instructions still remain available for things like assessments, and schools may still use lectures, assessments, and reading when necessary. Schools refer mainly to primary and secondary education, where motivational and foundational learning habits matter the most. But on the other hand, traditional schooling is still made of lectures, textbooks, worksheets, testing, and teacher-led instructions. Many students in the status quo experience school as boring and not an enjoyable experience. In the status quo, edutainment is used, but rarely as the main method. Moving on to presenting our team's first and second argument. Our team's first argument is about how engagement is the gateway condition for learning. Judge, the premise of this argument is that edutainment should be the primary education method because students cannot meaningfully learn material they're not motivated to learn. Learning begins with attention. Traditional classroom methods often assume that children are already willing to concentrate on boring material. That assumption is false for many children, especially younger students, struggling students, and students whose home environment do not already bring them into academic discipline. Edutainment solves this problem on the other hand. Games, stories, simulations, and interactive challenges change just listening to lectures into active participation. They give students immediate goals, feedback, etc., etc. This increases perseverance when material becomes difficult because students experience learning as a task they are engaged in, not just a simple lecture. Judge, this argument does not imply that entertainment will automatically replace academic rigor. It means that entertainment is going to be used as the motivational source. For example, math games can still require hard calculation. A historical roleplay can still require use of factual evidence. The main difference is that students will be motivated to research because they want to do well in the roleplay. Moving on, what are the impacts of this argument? One, we will better enable schools to give students knowledge by solving the main problem. Edutainment as the default setting makes it easier for students to pay attention. This can lead into better attendance, stronger motivation, etc., etc. Two, solving these problems also leads into solving the gap between academic excellence between those who have rich family backgrounds and those who don't. Often, disadvantaged people cannot afford to support their children's academics. This becomes a serious problem because a lot of minority kids from poor households just end up giving up on school and academics as a whole. This then creates a cycle where education system widens the gap between privileged minority and the disadvantaged minority. But on our side, we solve this problem. No, thank you. Moving on to our team's second argument. Our team's second argument is about how edutainment improves memory by putting knowledge in experience. Judge, the premise of this argument is that students remember educational concepts much better when they learn through interactive activities and just general experiences. Traditional instructions often separates information from context. Students just memorize facts for higher test scores, but fail to understand why they matter or how to apply them in the real world. This makes it shallow knowledge because it's most likely that students will forget concept they just memorized. Edutainment puts knowledge inside activities in action. A student who learns history through roleplay understands incentives because they have actually acted within them. A student who learns biology through interactive games actually understands the concept rather than just memorizing a list of terminologies. Experience creates stronger memory, so it's more effective education. But edutainment links content to emotion, choice, consequence, and feedback. Recalling that knowledge becomes easier. Students remember not only the answers, but the situation that made the answer meaningful. This argument shows the primary use of edutainment results in deeper understanding and can come useful in real-world contexts. This means that our team creates a higher quality and more effective education method for children. With all of these reasons, I'm very proud to propose. Thank you.
In the status quo, students are in big burden in studying for tests and exams, and it's the education's work and their responsibility to help them study, and it's him to help them support them, not to hinder them from learning actually. Edutainment is a type of learning through fun, engaging methods, and our team that thinks that using it as a primary method is inefficient. Our team's framing is we want a world where students can learn in school and get the most out of their learning and have a successful academic career. The stakeholders in our world are students and teachers. Before I move on to my arguments, let me rebut to the previous speaker. The previous speaker has mentioned that students experience learning as an engaging activity when they put edutainment in it. However, the students will mostly think it as a fun activity or a game. For example, let's say Kahoot, they just think it as a game and they use the method they learned. They use the method they learned to only to do the game better. So it will probably have a short-term memory, and they can't forget it easily. Also, later on, when they use traditional methods, also the opposition, the government team mentioned that they are going to use traditional methods also like they're going to use edutainment as a primary source. They're also going to use traditional methods, and also later in high school, they are required to use it sometimes. Their engagement will go down very rapidly in opposition in our world, rather than like just keep doing it. So ultimately, our world helps students study better and provide them a better environment. Now let me move on to my arguments. The first argument is students will learn less. Our team proves that fun lessons can make learning too simple. Why is this true? First, students focus on the fun, not actually on the lesson. So that means they remember the game, but they forget the idea and what they actually need to learn. So, and also second, hard topics get simplified too much. So some things are difficult and need serious thinking, especially in exams and tests later on. There are going to be some hard questions. However, in games, they're too simplified, and they 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 are needed to be learned in traditional learning. And lastly, students avoid difficult thinking. Real learning needs effort, which students usually avoid, which try not to do, and real
Yeah,
learning
why,
needs
sir?
effort and uh rejected. And fun lessons may remove the effort. For example, in games, they might remove the effort to make it more fun. And what does this look like? Students enjoy a science game, but actually cannot explain how it works afterward and how it actually works. The impacts are the students can weakly the understanding of school topics, and students will face problems later when topics get harder and
Yeah, why,
demand
sir?
more complex knowledge. Yes.
So you tell us that the games aren't easy, and that you tell us that the games are too easy, and that these people wouldn't learn something. But wouldn't these games actually be advanced? Because the teachers also wanted to learn stuff in the first place. Also, why don't you provide like a comparison on why your side is better and students learn like more?
Pardon? Like, can you repeat it one more time, please?
Can I?
Huh?
Oh, like you said that the games were going to be too easy, but wouldn't the games actually be advanced so that the teacher can actually make sure that they learn something? Because that's the main incentive of this model in the first place.
However, students won't actually concentrate at the game, concentrate at learning it. They will actually concentrate at getting more scores at the games, which can also, like, some students may learn, but most students will only focus on getting good scores on the games, which can also affect their learning. The second argument is students will lose focus and discipline. Our team will prove that students won't able to properly pay attention in class. Why is this true? First, they get used to constant fun. They expect every lesson to be exciting and have games. Second, they cannot handle boring tasks. Studying, reading, and exams are often not fun and require a lot of repetition. Third, they demand on teachers to entertain them. Third, they don't actually learn how to focus them by themselves. They have to rely outside motivators. What does it look like? Students cannot study quietly at home because there's no game. The impacts are worse test performance and struggle at higher grades. Honorable adjudicator, you can see that edutainment shouldn't be the primary method, mainly because it harms students' focus and education. Therefore, the motion should fall. Thank you.
Panel, we believe that schools should employ edutainment as a primary education method. We think that edutainment is a gateway condition for learning and helps students actually engage in their learning and feel content in the classroom environment. Before moving on to my rebuttals and arguments, I would like to extend on a few key points brought to us by our Honorable Prime Minister. Our first argument was about how engagement is key for learning. If students fail to engage during lessons, then that means they do not listen to anything. On our side of the house, when students are interested, they will engage more, leading to more education. So second argument was about memory improvement. Students are able to remember things when taught through more fun or entertaining concepts. In the status quo, students only memorize concepts for exams. However, they tend to let it go afterward. Learning through experience helps them remember more. Now, moving on to my rebuttals, the leader of opposition said that students will only think it's a game. However, we reject the idea that education means fun before effort. Proper edutainment is not passive amusement. It is a structured challenge. A difficult simulation, debate game, or role play can demand enormous concentration. They also said that students will learn less. However, opposition assumes traditional schooling naturally builds discipline, and this is often false. For many students, traditional methods build avoidance, shame, and disengagement. A bored student staring at a worksheet is not practicing discipline, they are practicing mental absence. Edutainment can produce more sustained effort because students willingly persist through challenge. They said students avoid difficult thinking, but experience is not the enemy of structure. Experience can be the anchor that makes structure meaningful. For example, a market simulation does not replace economic theory. Yes?
How are you so sure that in a world where student motivation to learn is almost zero, students will just suddenly want to learn in your world?
We think that students will suddenly want to learn in our world because these like simulations and edutainment, we think that's more entertaining for them, at least compared to like sitting down on a desk and just staring at a worksheet. So because they're students, right, and they're like still little kids, and then if they won't find something like solving a worksheet entertaining because you don't actually perform anything, or like it doesn't require as much communication as well, and we think they'll find edutainment more engaging as well. So now moving on to my argument. Our team's final argument is about how edutainment democratizes learning for students with different strengths and backgrounds. So what do we prove it? We argue that making edutainment as the primary method helps students who are disadvantaged by narrow text-heavy or lecture-heavy schooling. Traditional schooling rewards a limited set of abilities, sitting still or listening quietly in written and reproducing information in written form. These skills do matter, but they are not the only indicators of intelligence or learning capacity. Students with a disability such as ADHD or like language barriers or like different learning profiles can be mislabeled as weak when the method is the problem. Edutainment diversifies access points. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, social, and strategic learners can enter the same concept through different forms of interaction. This does not lower standards, it broadens the pathways through which students reach them. When schools make engagement-based learning primary, they reduce the hidden advantage of students already trained to thrive in traditional classrooms. This makes education less dependent on pre-existing cultural capital. So why is this argument related and why is it successful to this debate, and why do we take this point home? So our Honorable Prime Minister already discussed how the motion can bridge the gap between different socioeconomic groups by removing the entry gap. This argument is unique and exclusive to our side because we extend the discussion to rewarding students with different features such as ADHD. We think the side opposition cannot achieve this because on their side of the house, since it's traditional standardized learning, it's difficult to often include features that are prioritized or customized for students with these different disabilities. Some students cannot handle standing still on a desk, and we think that even if they somehow apply these solutions, we think it won't be as effective because on our side of the house, we are able to simultaneously apply different solutions at the same time, like helping these people with disabilities as well as making it engaging. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Judge, the government side has never ever proven that their points are only exclusive on their team side. They need to 100% prove that these effects will only come if edutainment is almost always used. Hello, I'm the Deputy Leader of Opposition of today's debate, and I'd like to discuss our team's final argument. Before talking about our team's final argument, I'd like to rebut the impacts and ideas given out by the government team side. So firstly, the Deputy Prime Minister said that the game would force enormous concentration to succeed in games anyway, so that the kids will learn. However, I like to rebut this by saying that if it needs enormous concentration, isn't that like the same on our side where you have to you have to focus on lectures and assignments, and as they're little kids, they won't be able to concentrate for too long anyways because they're little kids. So if it's needs enormous concentrations and it's not as stimulating, it's not gonna actually learn. They're not actually gonna learn the lessons as well. So this point does not stand. Moving on, the Prime Minister's first argument is that kids would learn much better, especially for the poorer classes. However, I like to rebut this by saying that yes.
You earlier pointed out how little kids cannot handle enormous concentration, but won't there also be also concentration on your side, but then it could also still be more because of sitting on a desk and stuff?
Well, if it's but you're saying that enormous concentration, if it's fun game, you don't need enormous concentration. You just get into the game and handle the flow of it immediately. You don't need enormous concentration for that. So this enormous
concentration is completely separate from that. So this still does not stand. Moving on, moving on to rebuttals. So the Prime Minister points is that kids will learn better. However, this does not stand as edutainment thing is very time consuming. It is time consuming because it takes so much longer to do something like fun board games or a Kahoot because it takes, and also because it takes so long to teach the students, they won't learn the material properly and likely only learn a simplified version or maybe nothing at all. I'll emphasize more on our team's final argument. But also because of this, the students won't be able to learn anything later on in school because they don't have the base of information from the edutainment classes in the earlier years. So it is super hard for the students to learn things later on, making it harder for the students to learn long term anyways. So this does not stand. The Prime Minister's other point is about engagement. This does not stand, as engagement will only be confined to the game because playing the game is fun, not actually preparing for the game, because that just not fun at all. This way, the engagement would only make the kids remember a little bit of the start, and trying to do games later on would force them to remember, would lead to number one, the kids forced to study on their own, which is not fun and motivating. Or number two, they perform bad at the edutainment like quizzes, games, or classes, which is going to demotivate and therefore make them unengaged anyways. So this argument does not stand at all as well. So now I'd like to rebut the government team's rebuttal. So the leader of opposition said that the learning isn't like good for everything. The deputy prime minister said that
Right.
they would engage, so they will reject, so they will learn better on their side. However, this argument still stands as you will not be able to study well later on in life because you're constantly stimulated, so you won't be able to do high concentration tasks like learning a new language or science. These need concentration, and making kids do mostly edutainment would not work. Now I'd like to talk about our team's final argument, which is about that it is inefficient and even useless at many situations. Now, why is this true? So in the government team's world, edutainment would be the primary teaching method, which means that it will almost always be used with only a few exceptions. Now, what takes longer, memorizing the first 10 digits of the periodic table or drawing the shapes of the elements and listening to a song about them? Yeah, the difference is huge. And yes, we do agree that edutainment should sometimes be used, like for example, when the learning material is super hard to understand, or to give students a spark of maybe wonder at the start of the year. But other than that, why do we need to constantly use this inefficient learning method? It is going to take up so much time, with most of the material not even being difficult or important, which also means that edutainment does not give the benefits of wonder and motivation because there's nothing to really be motivated about. This will lead to students and not like this will lead to like, because it takes like so long to teach, this will make the teachers do one of these two conclusions. Number one, teachers getting extremely stressed because they have to adjust to edutainment all the time. Or number two, teachers reduce and simplify the material to reduce stress, which might even cause problems for the students long term because they didn't fully learn or understand the material. Thank you for listening.
The main weighing question I will be answering in my speech today is on whether entertainment functions as a bridge into academic rigor, or does it just become a substitute for rigor and learning in the first place? But before moving directly onto our team's two main clashes, let me quickly bring up some important clarifications on this debate. So they talked about how, and they tried to point out, they said that our points were never unique and we never talked about this. We actually did do this with our DPM speech, and if they really want us to do this till we're 100% sure this can never be in any case replicated on the other side of the house, then they have no unique benefit in this call out as they didn't either, and they can't assume us to have a perfect case in the first place, right? They talk about how our side is so bad too. Second clarification, they talk about how our side is so bad, how it's so poor, and how we have and how it's not gonna work, but they have no real alternative they can fall back on either to get more learning on their side of the house. On our side of the house, at least they have motivation, and in the best case, this is gonna be infinitely better than a blank canvas that they have not painted, and we have no image of what their world will actually look like. Thirdly, they say students could be demotivated in games because it's too hard. But doesn't that just show that it's also difficult and that students actually have to try so they learn lots of stuff? How does this point benefit them, right? Fourthly, they responded to our rebuttal by saying if games require enormous concentration, it's too hard. But after the POI, they said that it doesn't give concentration, which is a complete contradiction. Now let me move on to our team's two clashes. Moving on, our first clash is a principal clash based on which team better fulfills the purpose of education, of learning for like these students. So on our side of the house, we told you that engagement is the key to learning, and that when children are more actively engaged through our policy, using games, stories, and more, we can turn these into passive engagement to active participation. They give students immediate goals, feedback, and emotional stakes. In response, others of the house responded by saying that students will think of stuff as a game and only try to have fun. We actually accept this rebuttal and take this as a benefit in the first place. This isn't a harm. That's actually the mechanism that
POI.
improves learning in the first place. As if which they would have known if they listened to our speech more properly. When students perceive learning as fun, they become much more willing to participate, take risks, and persist through difficulty. Even in the worst case, they have no comparison here that their side is any better and just like relying on a blank canvas, as I've already told you. The other side of the house also talked about how fun lessons make learning way too simple, and they only have fun as part of their argument.
POI.
They assume that games means not serious, which is completely false and generally a bad characterization. Games can be structured with clear learning objectives, progression, systems, and consequences. For example, in a physics simulation games, students still have to apply hard correct concepts like force of energy, which is really hard to use. Secondly, even if students are enjoying themselves and have fun for once in school, that does not mean they are not learning. There isn't even a mechanism on this point here anyways, right? In fact, when students are emotionally engaged, they're more likely to focus, participate, and retain info, which is what both sides of the house want.
POI last chance.
Obviously, we care about students. Sorry, I have no time to accept that POI. It's the 3-minute mark anyways. Now let me move on to our team second clash, which is on which team better promotes a higher quality education for these students in the first place, or moreover fits the burden. The premise of this argument on our side of the house is that students can remember educational concepts a lot better when they learn through interactive experiences. After all, traditional instruction often separates information from context. Students memorize facts just for high test scores, but fail to understand why they matter, how to apply them, removing most value. Only in our side of the house does edutainment put knowledge inside activities and action. A student who learns through more interactive games actually understands the concept rather than memorizing a list of terminology. They said that it makes people not focus on tests and then instead and stuff like that. Here they shift the goal of education to doing well on tests, which goes against the burden on understanding material, which they literally said. This itself is also a very narrow and flawed metric. Education is supposed to build understanding, not just short-term memorization, right? If students only focused on tests, they will forget the material right after, which is the whole point we're arguing and trying to solve in the first place. The other side talks about how students avoid difficult thinking in these games. This is just assumption with absolutely no mechanism, and clearly the other side doesn't listen to our case at all. There's absolutely nothing here about how the edutainment inherently removes difficulty, right? It simply changes how difficulty is presented and used. In fact, well-designed games and interactive tools often require more problem solving, not less, because the student must also actively engage rather than passively listen. And to do well on the game, they're gonna want to do harder challenges and stuff like that. Thank you for listening to my speech.
Edutainment and games are only useful when students have background knowledge and students play games to check their skills. If students play games straight from the beginning, playing games will be a waste of time. So as opposition will, I'll do 3 main things in my speech: rebuttals, weighing, and clashes. Before moving on to rebuttals, I'd like to quickly point that edutainment still exists on our side to support and reinforce learning. As mentioned in our first speaker's framings, I do not get why government is keep telling us that our side does not have edutainment and we'll just focus on memorization. So moving on to rebuttals. The government's case do not solve the problem of students having no motivation in learning. Their whole case is based on the assumption that students will somehow study hard and learn independently. This is not true because students are stuck in the digital world and edutainment for them is game and entertainment, not learning. Fun for students in the status quo is something that is not serious. So in order for students to learn, fun should not be the main method. And when the so for example, when the teacher says that we will do Kahoot today, students do not take it seriously since they do not think that is doing Kahoot is related to their learning because they think none of that's gonna come out in the test or quiz or whatsoever. So therefore, this harm to worsen and using edutainment as a primary source will not help the student learn. Not now. Instead, teaching and giving information to students should be the main strategy before moving on to win. I'll let us have your POI.
Okay, so you said that you don't understand why Gulf said we can't have edutainment, but isn't the fundamental burden on your side of the house to explain why edutainment doesn't have any benefits? That's also even repeatedly pushing this whole debate, right?
Okay. The motion clearly states that it using as a primary source. Our leader of opposition has mentioned that we can use edutainment as a not an alternative, but a method to reinforce and strengthen learning. So we use lectures, and traditional methods of learning, and then we include projects or Kahoot to actually check the students can learn. And since the students can engage later on, the motivation will come back. Moving on to Wing, there's a clear metric in this debate about student motivation and improvement. Our case is way more significant since students can learn first by getting lectures and then using edutainment in order to reinforce their learning. In government's world, students do not learn since even though they might learn some material through lectures, detailed information cannot give in since they invest little time in traditional learning. However, our site allows students to learn more accurately since they invest more time into lectures and learning. Our world can bring back motivation because they can know how how their learning is gonna be used since they learn the material first, then do projects, and use it as a secondary source, not use edutainment as a secondary source, not a primary source. So moving on to clashes, is the first clash in this debate is about effective learning methods. So government's mechanism on this clash is that they will learn by activities and playing. However, this cannot help the children learn because, as mentioned in my weighing, it will not be taken seriously, meaning that it will be treated like a game instead of an opportunity to improve, as proven by my previous speakers and my speech. This shows that edutainment has some benefits, but these benefits all disappear when it is considered as a primary source of education. It will do nothing but decrease the productivity of learning and bring back motivation. However, our mechanism on this clash is that we can actually bring back motivation since students know where the material they learn is going to be used and also get accurate information. This leads to themselves have at least this can help students check their skill levels and get help actually improve at the end of the day. So side opposition takes this clash home. So second clash in this debate is about overall success and academic career. Op has clearly won this clash because using edutainment as a primary source of education will result in nothing more than a waste of time because students will not take it seriously. On the other side, our side support the students and help them improve in the long term, eventually helping them have a successful academic career. So all of these reasons, since opposition is the bench that actually helps the students improve instead of wasting their time. So opposition takes this home, proud to oppose.
Today, as the opposition reply, I'd like to say why our side has already won today's debate. So firstly, I'd like to talk about the main impacts and points given out in today's debate. So firstly, this is about lessons and material. So in this, the government side is supported by saying that students will learn better because it is actually fun. And the opposition also said that students will not learn because they'll forget it after the game as it is not taken seriously. Our side has already won this because the government has been rebutted by the opposition whip and the deputy of opposition because they said that they will only focus on the game, not learning, and even if they do, they will forget it after the game. Our side was also rebutted by saying that our side was also rebutted by saying that it would be taken seriously because of focus, but it has been countered by saying that you actually almost always use it. You cannot focus later on in life, not allowing them to learn later on in life. And also there was also a few unresponded things from the opposition from the proposition side. So firstly, it is about high concentration edutainment to make kids learn, and the deputy of opposition said for this that this does not have any mechanization explanations nor examples, and also rebutted as well by saying that there's no example anyways. So this is a lacking case, and also there was an unresponding case about a very important thing about focus. So in this, our side has said that kids with focus cannot be able to focus later on in life as they were constantly stimulated when they were young. However, they did not respond to this fact. They did not respond to this fact as well. So to summarize, I'd like to talk about the word comparison. So in this word comparison, our team side is where although some student so our team side is where there will be game based and although so in this case, so first we talk about the government team side. So the government team side is where although the kids will have a bit more fun, they won't actually be able to remember this material later on in life. And even if they do, it is simplified, so they cannot learn, making it harder for the kids to learn later in life. And our teams is where the students actually have focus and actually have focus, so they can actually study later on in life, and they also learn all of the material, which is going to be way more important. So what I told you in my speech, I talked about how our team had already won today's debate. For all these things, proud. Today, as the opposition reply, I'd like to say why our side has already won today's debate. So firstly, I'd like to talk about the main impacts and points given out in today's debate. So firstly, this is about lessons and material. So in this, the government side is supported by saying that students will learn better because it is actually fun. And the opposition also said that students will not learn because they'll forget it after the game, as it is not taken seriously. Our side has already won this because the government has been rebutted by the opposition whip and the deputy leader of opposition, because they said that they will only focus on the game, not learning, and even if they do, they will forget it after the game. Our side was also rebutted by saying that our side was also rebutted by saying that it would be taken seriously because of focus, but it has been countered by saying that you actually almost always use it. You cannot focus later on in life, not allowing them to learn later on in life. And also there was also a few unresponded things from the unresponded things from the opposition from the proposition side. So firstly, it is about high concentration edutainment to make kids learn, and the deputy of opposition said for this that this does not have any mechanization explanations nor examples, and also rebutted as well by saying that there's no example anyways. So this is a lacking case. And also there was an unresponding case about a very important thing about focus. So in this, our side has said that kids with focus cannot be able to focus later on in life, as they were constantly stimulated when they were young. However, they did not respond to this fact. They did not respond to this fact as well. So to summarize, I'd like to talk about the world comparison. So in this world comparison, our team side is where, although some student so our team side is where there will be game based and like although so in this case, so first we talk about the government team side.
Judge, our team's burden in this debate was to prove that edutainment can increase the quality of education and also the effectiveness of education and involve engagement and the incentive to learn for students. We also had a burden to prove why our side makes education accessible for everyone, no matter if they're from a poor household or if they're disabled, nor if they're a minority. Their team's burden was to prove why traditional structured instructions as the primary method of education is better, and how edutainment is only beneficial when used selectively. They tried to prove their burden, but couldn't give valid reasons why. And at the end of the day, our team still does not get how their world looks like. Moving on to some of opposition's flaws. Judge, as you have already mentioned multiple times, team opposition just assumes that students will be willing to learn and stay focused on their world. Judge, as we have already stated, students are not always willing to focus on boring material, especially younger students, struggling students, and students whose home environment do not already bring them into academic discipline. Furthermore, they didn't respond to most of our points. An example was when we talked about how minorities and how this becomes a serious problem because a lot of minority kids from poor households just end up giving up on students and from school and academics in this current status quo. This then creates a cycle where the education system widens the gap between privileged majority and the disadvantaged minorities. But on our side, we solved this problem. Furthermore, the opposition kept on saying that none of our arguments stood, but never gave valid reasons why. Moving on, they also said that edutainment does not equal fun. And they also said that edutainment just equals fun and lacks seriousness. But Judge, our team believes that edutainment is a definition of engagement. And they also said that students won't take edutainment seriously. But because students find school fun and are actually engaged, does not mean that they're going to find school as a joke. Isn't it simply common sense that even though students find school as fun, that they won't just take it as a joke and won't do anything seriously because they know that school is important for their future? And even though these students are young, they still have common sense. With all of these reasons, we believe that we won this debate and I'm more than happy to propose.